Welcome to all of our ISM members and guests to the ISM New Jersey webinar series. Today, we will be presenting part 4 in our Creating Procurement Harmony Series. Today's feature, procurement horror stories. Could you tell? And I'd like to thank Arkestro for all the support they've given us during this series and throughout the entire year as well. We want everybody to chime in, put in your questions, any comments for our speakers today. So please put it into the chat, and then we'll answer all your questions as we can get to them. At this time, I'm going to turn the program over to our host, Shannon Kreps. She's the Vice President at Marketing at Arkestro, and she's going to kick off our program today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kathy. It has been fun to do this series with you guys, and we decided to end it on Halloween with our procurement horror stories. And I have two fabulous, scary women here today, only scary in that they're so scary smart. So I want to tell you about both of them first. From Arkestro, we have Robyn Sablosky. Robyn has 4 years as an AI and machine learning product manager and 7 years in product management. Robyn has been a pivotal force in leveraging cutting-edge machine learning algorithms. Her 13 years in data-centric roles have equipped her with the expertise to deploy scalable AI solutions and formulate product strategies deeply rooted in data science. Robyn turns to computers for tasks she finds mundane. Her journey into product management was fueled by a belief that computers can optimize such tasks, allowing her to channel her intellect into more fulfilling pursuits, like planning her next travel adventures. She has an English degree from Northwestern University and a business degree from the University of Florida. And I love working with her. And then there's Susan Walsh, who's been a fun person that we've been with at Arkestro for a long time, has been a great collaborator with us. Susan Walsh is the classification guru. She's been cleaning, classifying, and fixing dirty data for over a decade, and set up the classification guru in 2017 to solve dirty data problems in the procurement world. As well as an entrepreneur, Susan is an industry thought leader, an influencer, and a global speaker, and she has great videos on LinkedIn. She's been listed as a Data IQ 100 for the last 2 years, as well as winning Data IQ Data Champion in 2022 and 2023. She's also a key influencer for the Accounts Payable Association, promoting the benefits of clean data across many industries. She's a published author of Between the Spreadsheets, Classifying and Fixing Dirty Data, and has her own online course, Fixing Dirty Data, the basics of data cleansing or data cleaning. In addition to this, Susan also has a TEDx talk, Say No to Know About Resilience. Oh, I might have said that wrong, Susan, you can fix me. Say No to Know About Resilience, which has amassed 3,000 views and counting. So we're super excited to have Robyn and Susan talk about dirty data, how we can take care of that. So I'm going to pass this over to you, Susan.
Okay, so if we...
Oh, sorry, I should say this is what we're going to cover off.
That's okay.
Our intros and welcome. Susan's going to talk about dirty data. Robyn is going to talk about how we can analyze and deal with dirty data when we can't quite fix it up. And we're going to talk a bit about the tech behind the scenes, and then clearing the smoke and mirrors. And also, please put questions in the Q&A, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, or put questions in the webinar chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. And we were thinking about offering a little prize for our first question. Did we have one? Susan, what were you going to give us here?
So the prize will be the Fixing Dirty Data course. So there'll be access to that. And we'll ask a question at the end.
Yes, that sounds good. All right. And Robyn might have one too. We'll keep going through. All right, now I'm turning it over to you, Susan.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the dark and despicable data den. Woo! Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to put a bit of a fun spin, because I've been talking about dirty data for a long time now. So it's nice to put a little bit of a spooky spin on it. But first of all, I think it's important to let's talk about what is dirty data, particularly in procurement and spend data. And the first thing that always comes up, next please, is typos. Pretty much in every single data set we know, and we've seen it everywhere. It can cause numerous different problems, multiple account creations, all kinds of different things like that. And then next up we have wrong descriptions, and they can mislead us. That could even be wrong classifications, misclassifications. So it's very, it's causing you a lot of time and effort and scariness that you really don't need in your data sets. Then next up, we have missing codes. Now, if we've got products and we're buying or selling items and we don't have the right codes, then we can't buy or sell the right things. We can have inventory and supply chain issues with that, because we've been doing a lot of MRO, material data cleaning recently, and we're finding that, you know, one product might have 4 different SKUs and about 5 different descriptions. So you have a lot more stock or inventory than you think you do. So you're unnecessarily using cash flow to buy more when you don't need it. So it can have all kinds of impacts. And then, of course, we have information in the wrong columns. And we see this all the time in supplier data. So you might see the zip code in the city column or vice versa. You might have the whole address in one cell. It can be really frustrating and a bit terrifying when you're trying to find what you're looking for. Then after that, we have no standard units of measure. And that's scary because we work in a global business community now. And so are we talking meters or inches, grams or ounces, miles or kilometers? Like, we can have all those things in the same data set, and it could be the same item but just named slightly differently. Again, we're working on a project right now and we're going to have to resize everything into millimeters because the sizing's all over the place right now. Next up, we then have currency issues, and that can be a problem if you don't get your currency conversions right, or you don't even realize that you have multiple currencies in a data set. It can inflate or deflate your numbers and give you the completely wrong picture about what's going on. And then my favorite, and I want some audience participation here, no shying away. I would love for you to type in the chat box how you format your dates. So what I'm going to expect to see is some day, month, years, month, day, years. Maybe some people are spelling the month out. Some people might use year, year, or year, 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 year. You might have dashes, slashes, dots, or no separators at all. And what that can do is create multiple versions of the same date. That can be really difficult to then match documents, POs, all those good things. Oh, at the moment, we've got 2 people doing the same thing. There we go. We've got some mixtures coming in now. And this is what I would typically expect to see even within one department, let alone one organisation. And then finally, all these things create our good old friends, the duplicates, or the near duplicates, which also appear. And that's something that is almost the same, but not quite. So you might have Classification Guru Street spelled out, and then you might have Classification Guru Street abbreviated. So those are near duplicates to me because they're not quite exactly the same. What does that mean? Well, that means you're spending time maybe assigning invoices to the wrong supplier account. That means that maybe invoices might be paid twice. There could be some fraud going on. It can be really hard to track. It can take a lot of time, again, over counting, things like that. So it can be really, troublesome and cause you a lot of headaches. But let's get into the really spooky stuff. What about examples of real life dirty data? So the first one that I'm going to give you, not so scary, LinkedIn. We all know LinkedIn, that well-known networking, training and recruitment platform. What it's not is a restaurant. And why that happened was because somebody looked at the description and decided to classify it based on the description. What they didn't use was context within the data, so they didn't look at all the rows and columns. They just looked at one particular item. It's so important, especially in spend data, to look at everything. And then the next point is, don't assume that we know what something is, because here's Tinder Corporation, and naturally you would assume that it's that well-known online dating site. Well, guess what? It's not. And the description in this case helped us out. Context gave us some information. This was a charity in the UK that we were classifying some data for. And experience just told me there's no way these guys would be working with Tinder, not even for advertising. So when we did a little bit of Google search, and we found out that there is a Tinder Corporation Limited in the UK that is an IT services company, nothing to do with online dating whatsoever. So even when you think you know something, you might not. So again, use the context of your data to help you guide you with all those patterns in decision making. And then there's more. So what happens when that data gets misclassified? Well, first of all, it ends up all over the place. Here's some legal services spend that we did for a client recently. They had it in construction and marketing and HR and finance. It was everywhere. When we reclassified everything, we found that the spend was 40% higher, and we're talking millions of pounds here. So it was a significant increase. Can you imagine? That's not even one category, but one bucket of spend, one item. This impacted their whole data set, and there were lots of things being moved from here to here. Imagine the whole picture that changes because of this here. How many suppliers do they have? Do they need that many? Can they negotiate better rates with a few legal companies instead? You know, there's a lot of opportunities here. And then if we go on, what about those messy addresses that we were talking about? This is one supplier, and this is all the different lines that we had in a supplier database that we're cleaning up. We've got abbreviations, we've got this, that, and the next thing. It's all over the place. It's crazy. So again, it's about having those standards, getting everyone to work the same way to avoid those things and not creating multiple records. And then talking about the MRO descriptions, we took all the different cap screws because they had loads of different descriptions. And then we reworded them, tidied them up, did a standard naming convention, and look how wonderfully clean and tidy and organised that looks now.
Beautiful.
Isn't it just? And then we can't go on without a data horror story. And what better than one from my book, Between the Spreadsheets. This is a true story. There was a £150 million children's hospital built. The opening in 2019 was delayed due to a spreadsheet error from 2012. Now, when they had put an RFP out, one supplier had actually flagged the error. Somebody had copied the dimensions from one column into the other. It messed up all the air conditioning and ventilation. So they had to do £16 million worth of remedial action before they'd even opened. All because A, somebody copied and pasted from one column into the other, and then B, because it was flagged and nobody did anything about it, which is just, that's the more outrageous thing to me and absolutely terrifying. Okay, so what about the consequences of that dirty data and in reporting and decision making? That's going to affect things like how many cost savings we can make or how much, the negotiations that we have with our suppliers, the supplier rationalization. Just by normalizing your suppliers, you can get that number down without even having to do anything. Then there's forecasting. You know, if somebody puts an extra zero in the kind of manufacturing forecast, and then procurement are buying more stock, raw materials, raw products, and then you don't actually need them, then we have to store them in the inventory and the warehousing. It causes all kinds of problems. Then it might affect your budgets for the year for your department or headcount, things like that. And then sales and marketing wise, it's targeting the right customers. If you're mailing out things to customers, potential customers, make sure your database is right. You know, make sure they're relevant customers who actually want to receive this, because otherwise you're just throwing money out the window. And then it's about shipping the correct products. Like, do we have the right information, like the right codes? Are we sending the right thing out? Have we set up the right dimensions? Because I've heard stories about TVs being set up as 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre instead of a metre by a metre. Now, if you're using some kind of software, you'd hope there would be roadblocks in place for this, but it doesn't always happen. Somebody who's planning a load, and I've done this in the past, you have to fit how much of this and that you can get on a truck. This could screw everything up quite significantly. So that's why it's really important. And then when it comes to technology implementation, everyone's talking about technology now, although it's been around for a while, funnily enough. Data cleaning is often neglected before people start projects, take on new tools and software. The errors are generally found after implementation. Staff lose faith in the data, they claim it's disengaged, it doesn't work, they don't trust it might cost a lot of money to fix. Then you have to hope that the staff will adopt technology. And then, of course, if not, the project is abandoned. And then that, we've heard stories of tens of millions of dollars being thrown out the window because they didn't get their data right in the first place.
Mm.
And of course, the question is, will AI take over my job? And Robyn is going to talk about just a fascinating how they're using AI in Arkestro, and it's just not even terrifying, it's mind-blowing, it's amazing. But I always say, as long as it can't tell the difference between a dog and a mop, an apple or an owl, or a dog and a bagel, I think we're safe. Well, I certainly am, because at the end of the day, AI needs to learn from training data. And how do you get clean training data? You use people like us. So I feel like we're in a good place. But I think that we need to use AI to leverage what we're doing. And also, like, some things we don't want to do. And so that's where we have an opportunity to use AI instead. I mean, remember when contract scanning, document scanning came in? Everyone's like, our jobs are over. Nobody wanted to do it in the first place. So nobody really missed it.
Awesome.
And then, I wanted to talk about the data cape. We wanted to make it spooky for Halloween. So I came up with your data should be consistent, and then accurate and precise and ethical. But to be honest, it was a bit rubbish. I couldn't make anything really good work. So I decided to flip it back to the data quote, which is on the next slide. Yeah, get rid of that, because it works. You have to make sure your data is consistent, it's organized, it's accurate, and it's trustworthy. So we go on to the next thing. I think we've got a video.
Let's see. I hope it will. I don't know if the sound will play. I might have to. Let's see. Can you guys? Some of you can hear the sound.
Are you leaving your data?
I can, yeah.
You wouldn't go out into sub-zero temperatures without the correct protection. So why do so many companies forget to protect their data? Unprotected data can lead to bad business decisions that cost money and put jobs at risk. That's why your data needs its coat on. This means making sure your data is consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. Consistent means using the same standards, terms, and classifications company-wide. Organized data makes it easier to find. Think of it like a messy closet. It can be difficult to find what you're after, even when you know it's in there. When organized correctly, it becomes easier to find what we want. Data should be accurate, which can mean different things to different people, but at its most basic level, accurate data is correct. And finally, data should be trustworthy. This is critical. If your team can't trust the data, they might not use it. Business decisions around jobs, staffing, and budgets are all based on data, so it's got to be right. Like any code, there are differences in the quality of data services out there. If you buy a cheap coat, it might not be waterproof or protect you enough, and it won't last more than one season. If you don't invest in good quality data services, you will end up paying twice as much, if not more in the long run, to fix the earlier mistakes. If you'd like to speak to an expert about data in your own business, visit theclassificationguru.com to find out more.
And that is enough of the scary stories from me. I'm going to hand over to the amazing Robyn. I can't wait to hear more about this.
You leaving your data.
There we go.
Awesome. To get started to talk about the dirty data, the first thing that we do at Arkestro is that we basically look at all your data and we start to classify it. And so we have 3 classifiers that we look at data. We call it clean data, invalid data, and outlier data. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what each of these mean. But a lot of times what I hear from organizations is my data is dirty and there's a mistrust on the data, but you don't actually know what part is dirty. So it's a little bit hard to talk about how dirty it is, how bad it is. until you start to classify it. So the first thing we do, we classify it, and we let you know this is the good data, this is the bad data, and this is, and then we start going down these rabbit holes to kind of understand what's going on with that red data, that invalid data. Next slide. So there's a lot of dirty data goblins. And so the biggest dirty data goblins that we see is blanket POs. So blanket POs that weren't intentionally made to be blanket POs, they just kind of happened as blanket. So that's one of the biggest goblin we see. We see a number of duplicate POs as well, people not realizing that they're sending them out. Missing category names, missing information, all of that is bad. And it's not anything that sometimes you can fix it a little bit or you can cross-reference. But in general, this is data we have to throw away because we can't find any use from it. And so going to the next.
Yeah. You guys can see I have a little slide goblin where every once in a while my screen contracts. So sorry about that, my own little mystery here. Go for it, Robyn.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite data things that I always find is the same item in multiple SKUs or the same item in multiple categories. And so we take a look at these items and we're able to start to classify them. We usually use total spend in terms of classification to look at these things. And to understand which is the primary versus which is the duplicate. But there's lots of classification that's missed by not looking at these two things. And so this really helps us get a better idea of rectifying the data and fixing the bad data so that we can do a better analysis. And then there's many different ways to look at machine learning looks at dirty data. One of the ways we look at them is we do data pre-processing, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we also do data normalization. One of my favorite data normalization things is looking at the standard deviation of high price variation items. And so what we find is a number of items is they can't possibly be the same item because the price is way too varied. So sometimes we'll find an item that has a price of $1 next to a price that has $100, and there's just no way that these prices are the same item. And so that's one way we kind of take a look and we actually find out, okay, this data is not making sense. We also talk about anomaly detection as well. So anomaly detection is anything outlier, anything that doesn't make sense, we take a look at. And then also it helps in terms of weeding out kind of the bad data is also choosing the right algorithm. So a very popular one that kind of comes up, we do use random forest, but this would be depending on the use case, of course. Random forest models are known because of how they do the classification, that they actually weed out a lot of bad data. So choosing the right algorithm, doing pre-processing, normalization, all these things help us get to an insight or an information that we can give you to give you the best information possible. And then pre-processing. Pre-processing can be pretty scary. With units of measure, we ever have 60 classifications of unit of measure that you can use at any second. And so unit of measure in particular, it's so important to get this right, because anytime you multiply or do things, if the unit of measurement is wrong, it's going to cause a lot of errors downstream. And so it's very, very important. In terms of currency, we also look at currency. There's two different classifications that you can use for currency. The first way to do currency is that you already have your own conversions that are kept on a table. And so we, some of the best practices we see from our customers is they'll actually every week have a measurement that they go in to convert them. So that's one way to do currency conversion, is that you handle it yourself. Another way to do it is there's many APIs out on the market right now that help you do currency conversion for that day. If you're at Amazon, it's going to be literally that hour in which currency conversion happens. So it just really depends on the needs of your organization and what the best way to do. But there's many solutions to currency conversions, but those conversions have to be right in order for everyone to be speaking the same language. And then another thing we do in pre-processing is supplier data enrichment. And so with supplier data enrichment, basically what we are looking at is any missing information around the supplier so that we can make sense of which supplier that this is working on. So there's a number of reasons that we would do it. An example is if we're going to be suggesting a supplier ahead of time, we want to make sure we have all the information possible so that that we let you know that this supplier is the right supplier you should be choosing in the future. And the next one is spend classification. So there's many different ways to do spend classification. These are the most common one is looking at things from indirect versus direct. This is something we can usually tell from the data. And the other one we do is services. And so services, a lot of times in pre-processing, we exclude services. And so you might be wondering why we exclude services is because services need their own models compared to products. And so what happens in terms of machine learning, and this has been true in terms of my entire data science career, anytime anyone asks me services versus products, you usually have to split them out by models because services depend on humans and humans run on a completely different schedule than when a product is happening. And so anytime there's services, if we're doing product models, we will be excluding services, and if we're doing a services model, we'll be excluding products in order to get a better outcome. And then there's a number of geospatial data that we look at, supplier locations, other logistics. When we're doing these pre-processing to basically make sure an insight actually makes sense, we want to make sure we're talking about generally the same locations, because as you know, the price of something in New York City is going to be very different than the price in Kansas. And so we want to make sure that we understand where things are being bought that could possibly explain price surges and other things as well due to location. And anomaly detection. Anomaly detection is my favorite form. Anomaly detection is so much fun. I don't know why I love it. It's just every single time it surprises me. But anytime with any machine model, you can put anomaly detection on it and it'll show you the outliers and what's going on with your data. This is one version of anomaly detection. Sometimes I show it this way, that something is so strange that it can't be possibly a number within the given organization. Another way to think about it is your traditional spend curve, your bell curve. Anything at the ends of the bell curve will also be outliers, and that's not information we want to put into your, we want to make available in terms of the recommendations and the insights that we give you. So we snip off the bell ends to make sure that we're giving you the information that makes the most sense. And so anomaly detection and outlier detection is not good or bad, but it could be possibly wrong data. And so we try to give it its own classification so that we can spend some time to go through it and understand how we can best help you. And this is one of my favorite things. This is a very old button, but it's garbage in and gospel out. And so anytime you look at any sort of analysis in terms of data, the first thing you have to ask, what is actually inside, what is being put inside in terms of the data analysis, whether it's a model, anything, what is actually going in and what is going out. And so a lot of times a pretty chart can throw people off because they don't actually understand the data that's going inside that pretty chart. Sometimes things will look like as an output, they seem that they make sense, but if the underlying data doesn't make sense, or if there's issues, if anomaly detection has been applied, if pre-processing hasn't been applied, then you really have to be careful. And so in terms of the data you're looking at and what kind of information and recommendations that are coming from it. And so I just always remember garbage in, gospel out. Just because something is pretty doesn't make it true. So, yeah. And then, yeah, garbage is not bad. And so with that said, and one of the reminders is ChatGPT is essentially, you could argue the internet is garbage and all of ChatGPT is measured on garbage. So from that perspective, different models use different information. So one person's garbage could be another person's treasure, which is exactly very true for large language models. And then let's see. So anytime you're looking at data, it's very important to be a data detective. And so understanding what you're looking at is objective, whether the expected outcomes of that model, what data went in that model, that could possibly be used, and what are these predictions possible? And so it's always important when you see a new set of data, just understanding how this was derived to see if it makes sense, because in the data world, it's very real that they call them in large language models, it's called hallucinations, is basically you get information that is not true because it looks like it possibly could be true. Based on n-grams and other things being put together. And so you don't want that. And so anytime you're looking at any sort of data analysis, whether you're looking at a large language model like ChatGPT, or you're looking at a basic analytics, or even a spreadsheet, take a second and ask yourself, what are you looking at? Could this possibly be true? Does the data that went in there, does it make sense? What is this, if it's a model, what was this model actually created for? The model in general, outside of large language models, models are very, very narrow, and they have one purpose, and they do one thing very, very well. And so understanding what that one thing that the model is doing is super, super important to make sure that you're getting the recommendation and you're getting the information that you need in order to do the best thing possible for your organization.
Very good. So that's been a lot of good information about how do we deal with our dirty data up front, and then how we can manage what we have left of dirty data, or if we've cleaned it or not cleaned it. So I have a question for you guys both, and it's about context. And I know, Susan, you addressed some of this, but
yeah,
I'll tell this funny story that I lived in the UK for 10 years, and I used the word tender all the time while I was there. It's like an ITT, an invitation to tender. You take something out to tender, and that's really a sourcing event. And when I moved back to the US, I still used that term once in a while and didn't really think much of it. And then I changed jobs and started working for a US-based company that acquired a UK-based company. And the UK company was doing procurement and using all these tender terms, and it didn't bother me at all because my mind just switches back and forth, as I'm sure yours does, because you go back and forth. And I remember once we were having these issues with our search results, and our sourcing page wasn't getting as much hits, and it was because our SEO guy insisted that we use the word tender all over the place. And in America, that didn't work, and it took me a while to explain this to him, and the only way I was actually able to do it was when I started doing searches and chicken tenders came up.
yeah,
and then
yeah.
got it, like, oh, so like in the context, the tender didn't make sense in the US for this word, even though it has its own meaning. So I'm just like, for both of you, so Susan first, how do you even, I guess my question is, how do you figure out that context while you're searching through all that data? Do you have an automated way to do that, or is it your mind, or how do you know?
A lot of it is experience now. Myself and my team have been doing this for over 10 years, but if we talk about GL codes, that's a great example of vagueness. Like services. Yeah. What services? IT, cleaning, legal, and then that's when you need extra information around it. So do you have a supplier name? Do you have a location? Do you have a PO or an invoice description that can help? But it's all, the main thing is trying to prevent this in the first place. So, when I set up new taxonomies for clients, for example, I always say that they should be, someone should come in off the street and be able to understand it. So try not to use too much internal language and terminology, because if someone new starts and doesn't know what that means, then things can end up getting misclassified, making things clear. But yeah, we are the kind of, I like to call us the bit before technology. So we help to clean the data to get it ready to be used by AI and all that.
Well, and so then on Robyn, how, for things that slip through the cracks, how do we use things like machine learning models or AI in general to help us figure out context?
Yeah, you cross-reference. That's it. Same thing as Susan, it just models cross-referencing, whether it's people or other words. So just depending on example, you're going to be looking for various context in order to bring that context back, in order to say that this equals that over and over again. So some of those things are, again, sometimes you just have to you see the problem so many times that you are programming it, and other times you have to kind of go back to it on the third or fourth draft. And so you don't actually catch it the first time. It gets like filtered out because you're just trying to get your desired output. And then you go back and you cross-reference to say that this is true and that is true, and that this can't be this without that. So sorry, that's very generic, but.
Actually, yeah, something else we have here is for each project, because, you know, 1 week we can be working with one company, one industry in one country, and then the next week it's a different industry in a different country. So when we're working on each project, we have like a list of, you know, if it's this supplier, it should be this, or if it's this description means this. So everybody is doing the same thing. So it's that data quote again, making sure everyone's consistent, doing everything the same way, helping to minimize those issues.
Gotcha. No, again, it's why we still need people out there, right? And
yeah. And then obviously if nobody is doing that, I'm going to come haunt you in your dreams tonight.
I know. And kind of on that front as well, when you're talking about creating those standards, there are some standards out there like UNSPSC codes. Do you find that, I know, I have a fun conversation about this. So So what kind of standards out there, Robyn, you've talking about, you know, Amazon changing their unit of measure standards maybe every hour or like updating those. So what are the kind of standards out there that people could trust in or import into their systems and have, so that you're not constantly inventing those, or do those standards exist? I'm just curious. Robyn, you start, and Susan.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what your organization does. For example, you know, if it's books, ISBN is going to be the standard. So that's an easy one in terms of a classification you can use. But you're looking for anything that's standard within your industry that you can cross-reference and continue to cross-reference to create that standardization. And so the lack of standardization really doesn't come from the company inside. It actually comes from when you're dealing with other suppliers. So suppliers have their own way of classifying things that you're trying to base. So most people, their product and what they're trying to develop is it's actually not that bad or as bad as you can think. But as they're introducing other suppliers, as they're bringing people in, every supplier has their different way of thinking about things. And so that's actually what's bringing a lot of the lack of standardization. And so for most people, they know what they're selling, they're doing well what they're selling, they're in business for a reason. But as they're dealing with different people and trying to get the best price or the best quality for their product, that's usually when some of the lack of standardization is. So some of those things that can help is like a manufacturer part number. Those can help sometimes if they're cross-industry, but it really just depends on your particular industry of what you can reference, and finding those reference points so that you can continue to standardize the data as much as possible.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So depending on the industry, for a spend taxonomy, UNSPSC can be great for things like MRO and medical equipment and things like that. But if you want marketing spend classified, don't use the UNSPSC. I've seen clients modify the UNSPSC, which actually makes it worse, believe it or not. There's SIC codes, there is E-class over here in the UK, PROC-HE was also a taxonomy, but I'm finding that clients are more and more gravitating towards building their own customized taxonomy so that they can classify the data how they want it, which means they can then report and analyze how they want it.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I think you both made that point about how it's as a business, you're doing it the way you need to do it. You're doing it in a way that suits your business. You're doing it because you know what's right. But having this introduction of third-party data that comes in, or other information that you have to reconcile, is where troubles can occur. And I suppose that's life. We can't all live in a little bubble on our own at any point. We have to interact with others.
One more thing. So actually, like maybe last week or the week before, I actually did a post with a document on UNSPSC versus a customized taxonomy, and I did like the pros and cons of both. So if people go to the Susan Walsh Classification Guru on LinkedIn and go through my profile, you should be able to find that if you want to just have a look at that and, you know, decide if you need something different.
I like that. And Robyn, I'm kind of throwing this one out at you. With all of this cleanse data that we're creating. What do we do with that here at Arkestro, or how can we help people with that data today?
Yeah, so basically what we do, the whole process, basically in terms of cleansing the data, is to get insights. And so the insights that we specialize in are insights around purchase price variance. There's different kinds. It could be supplier, it could be plant, it could be geographic as well. There's PO fragmentation, supplier fragmentation. So there's many different insights that we go and we look in terms of the different dimensions, and that's essentially why we're trying to cleanse and get as much clean data within the system as possible, so we can give you the best insights and be able to process the data. And we use different models as well. We have a best time to buy model that basically says that, you know, if you buy this Q4 versus Q1, that you'll get a better savings, and that'll be better for your organization. And so all those models are dependent on data that isn't missing information, so that we can make that recommendation to you.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, with that, will open it up for questions. It's about 1:15, but does anyone have any questions that they want to ask any of our data gurus here?
Yeah. Do you want me to do the question now for the competition, or while they're thinking about questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first person in the chat who can tell me what the data quote stands for, so COAT, can win the course. Good luck.
Come on, folks.
I feel like we need Jeopardy music.
I know.
Yeah, we need the music. Suspense music.
But it should be like the Monster Mash music.
So actually, yeah, if people watching, it'd be interesting, like, how many of you have data issues?
Yeah. Does everyone deal with just perfect data right now?
Yeah. Or data nightmares?
I have data nightmares.
We have some clients with really indescript, like it's a supplier name and an indescript GL code, and it's very hard to classify what they do. There's lots of Googling. So no POs, no invoice information, just that. So the more information you have, the easier everybody's lives will be.
Yeah. Do you have any markets that you think it's worse in? What do you think is the scariest industry? Do you have a scary? I know what I think the scariest industry is.
I don't. Actually, some of the messiest data I've ever seen is in finance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I haven't really done much oil and gas, but that can be tricky to classify. And things like lumber. Mike, you win a prize. Message me your email and I'll get that set up for you. Congratulations. How about you, Robyn? What's your worst industry?
I think anytime I would think some of the industries where you're buying from suppliers very locally. Sometimes the suppliers are like small, but anything that shows any industry that's really dependent on high localization can get pretty messy pretty quickly because a lot of those things aren't automated.
That's kind of the project I was just referring to. Yeah, it's a lot, and maybe they've grown without growing their systems and their processes and as well. So they've become a large company, but still have really basic processes. It's like medical and lab equipment can be fun as well. You know, like all the different chemicals and things. And then, you know, really, this is the kind of stuff that we know because we've been doing it so long, like antibodies. So you can have antibody, but you can also have MAB, you can have anti, you could have anything referring to human, goat, mouse, rat, rabbit. That's all antibody stuff. Like, you just pick stuff up as you go along, and, you know, like, we'd need to know that to train the AI, because otherwise the AI would never know. You'd end up with like rabbits and goats, probably. Or probably Robyn would just exclude all that stuff.
Maybe.
You guys are shy tonight. Come on, Mike. I know you're in the chat. So any questions, any issues, or Anything you want to ask?
They're all ready to go out trick-or-treating, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we scared them off.
All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, you can always get in touch. You can drop us a line on LinkedIn. You've got Susan's contact details. We will send out to everybody. We will get all the information out to do what you need as follow up for this. But thanks so much and have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.